you're running for the against Greg Davids and Steve Kemp, correct?
Right.
And that's for District 31B.
B.
You're running as an independent?
That is correct.
Okay, so what can you tell us about your platform?
This time, and I should preface that with I ran about, I'm not sure now, I think it's 6 years ago. And at that time, I had some unease with the political system, but this is, of course, before the Lehman Brothers collapse and the financial melees we're in. So I did concentrate on budget issues and basically bringing money back to District 31B, because at that time it was the school discrepancy. We had issues with levy overrides. We had issues with LJ money. We had issues with property taxes at that time already. And the Jesse Ventura program, if you remember, was bringing state money back and alleviating the school problem. So that time I concentrated on that, but I had these other issues in the background of my mind. And when it came up that I could either run as a third-party candidate, independence or independent, what I decided to do was make those my core issues. And this is long before the Fox News poll came out and said 79 or 80% of Americans preferred term limits. I always believed that this long-distance tenure by people was counterproductive. Pelosi, Reid, the rest of them, you know. It's impossible to get people out of office. So I decided this time, since I had the latitude to do so, that I would do exactly that. And in some ways, it's extremely gratifying, Jason, because when you so firmly believe in something, you know, you just put yourself right into it, and you never have to think twice. It's just wonderful. And that is, of course, term limits. And a lot of people have asked me on doorways, well, what would you say? And we need broad discussion on this. We want to bring everyone into the discussion. You know, I'm not going to forward anything in particular. I said anywhere from 8 to 12. That seemed to be a comfortable limit to most people for term limits. And then they'll have to move on. And I should say that the second and third parts of my platform are open primaries, like California's Proposition 14, as well as a lot of special interest money has been drawn into politics, and this, of course, undercuts people's influence. But I would say the first thing that would happen with term limits is that you catch special interest off guard, because they've spent, you know, 7, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, possibly forever, cultivating this special relationship, bringing money to the table for these people through PAC money and whatnot, and I'm well aware of how it works, because I've been part of other industries, I've been part of corn growers. We know how money comes in and how it works, and the recent Supreme Court decision sort of solidifies this, you know, undercutting freedom of speech. Or they said it was an abridgment of the freedom of speech, but I thought the Supreme Court decision was just atrocious for the people. That was a huge setback. But wouldn't it be fun to catch these fellows off guard and say, oh, you're going to have to educate somebody new after 8 to 10 years. You know, this would send them scrambling. You know, and each time the people would be able to forward someone new, and with that, a new attempt at bringing some order back to government through grassroots. So those are the three issues. The issue is term limits, open primaries, and campaign finance reform. Plenty should have never cut the political refund program. Huge mistake.
Now, at the state legislature, okay, when you're involved in participating, say you get elected, and you're involved in participating in the process of voting in different directions, and you know, part of committees that are trying to influence the direction that's in the best interest of our district, working with other Republicans and Democrats, because that's primarily what you're going to be dealing with. Do you see that as being a challenge coming in, kind of not completely aligned with, you know, the kind of the two majority parties you've got? You know, do you see that as a challenge? Any conflicts there with walking in and, you know, because, you know, by and large you'd be a minority walking into the situation there at the state.
I think it's an opportunity, because depending on how the election goes, you know, for instance, you know, being an underdog and being, it's difficult as a third-party candidate to be heard. I've had a lot of newspapers early on that just completely ignored the candidacy. In fact, one newspaper actually suggested that they shouldn't and wouldn't be covering third-party candidates. I hope that changes into the election. But I think depending on the election and its outcome, because I think this theme that I'm bringing to people's doors is resonating with them. If the election ends up setting up sort of a mandate for change, then I think it's an opportunity, because I could find myself in a situation where I could bring these issues there, and perhaps I wouldn't be a weak link, but I would be a stronger link in whoever I deal with. So I think looking at it as a weakness is a mistake. It might indeed be a strength. Now, we already know where my allegiance lies, and that's being a fiscal conservative. And I think that a lot of people that are now at the legislature find themselves in a difficult situation. They're defending the very system they're responsible for. So they can't really call a bad egg a bad egg. But the simple truth is, government has grown beyond what it should have in the last 10 years. We've all talked about the financial bubble. We've all talked about the financial crisis and the result of that. But no one's brought up that the government right now, state government, all levels of government, we're living in their own bubble. The economy no longer exists that was financing that government. And it lost touch with its core values. And that was, one was education. We all agree Minnesota was a great place to raise children, either through the secondary school system or the University of Minnesota. The next thing was, we had a good transportation system, you know, and that's falling into disrepair, especially in southeastern Minnesota. And the third thing was, we were noted for healthcare. We were noted, and now we've had government grow beyond those core services. A good example of that is, I don't know if you saw it in the paper today, the Star Tribune highlighted the fact that the DNR was building a shooting center, and they were looking for was it a 400-acre tract site for something like $600 million. Well, this may be a wonderful idea, but it's out of touch with the financial environment today, and I would suggest maybe they have too much money. So, now I'm sorry, I've run on and I've completely forgot the question.
That's okay.
That's what's important to this district, those principles. And I know where you were going with that was the district needs, number one, not one more school to go with a levy override and be short of money. Number two, 43 doesn't need just a resurface, it needs an upgrade. And the same thing goes for 44. People are upset that it's taken so long. If there's one core issue in Houston County, it's Highway 44. You know, I've got trucks that go across that road too, and I've sent them back into repairs, tears up my shocks, the tie rods, everyone else is in the same boat. I was just riding my motorcycle over to La Crescent for the parade, and I got in a rut, and it threw the bike about 6 inches in one direction. It's not safe to be on. And yet, when we cruise up to Duluth, or go up to the Iron Range, or somewhere else in the state, my God, I don't even feel like I'm in Minnesota because the roads are so much different. How to bring pressure to bear to the DOT?
Right now, obviously, this last week, late last week, there was an article came out in several different papers, an announcement about your eligibility to be on the ballot. Based on the way the law reads, you had to have 500 signatures to be included on the ballot. Now there's contemplation about whether or not, you know, they should reprint 30,000 ballots for both Fillmore and Houston counties. Sherbolter has basically said that she would only agree to appeal that if all three candidates would endorse that idea. Do you have any additional thoughts about that situation or opinion, or have you had any interaction or discussion with the other two candidates about whether, you know, maybe what direction would be best? Or because, you know, obviously the biggest concern there is that depending on how the election turns out, if based on those 500, signatures to get your name on the ballot, if somebody doesn't win, or however it turns out, another person involved in that election could end up appealing that, and then we'd have to have a special election. So it's just sounds like kind of a contentious issue that is being dealt with, and I'm just curious about your thoughts on that whole situation.
I think a little bit, to be quite frank with you, I think a little bit too much is being made of it. Mm-hmm. Because I thought it was really great that I could walk into the Fillmore County Auditor's office and not kill my entire day when I filed and could file, and that was wonderful. It was the first time we could do that. They certainly weren't aware of it, because my original intention was to file independence. And then I thought about it a minute, and whenever I have something difficult like that, I do one thing, and I'll confess, it's call my wife. So I asked her, well, she said, well, whatever you think. And I thought, well, I should file independent, because then I don't have to worry about what issues I forward, and if it's adversarial to any particular party platform, because I knew I wanted to do this. These particular core issues, particularly term limits, So, and they said yes, that was fine. So I simply pretty much changed it. I wrote right over it, and I wrote independent then, knowing that that was fine. So they certainly didn't know it, and I suppose good judgment on their part. They probably thought, well, it probably isn't. It wasn't even worth checking. Had they looked, maybe they would have found it. I certainly didn't know it, and it wasn't intentional. So I can't blame the auditor's office, if anyone, for that. It does highlight the open primary issue, so in that way I think it's beneficial, because if this highlights that, for no other reason, my candidacy will bring this to the forefront. But to move on, I really think that at this point, and I visited with another candidate at the Applefest Parade on Sunday, I think it was yesterday, and he certainly suggested that I should stay on the ballot.
And he's a candidate that you're up against.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, he's another one of the candidates. And so he suggested I stay on the ballot. I think from what I've read in the papers, all three have now given indication to the newspapers that they won't contest it. And so there'll be no issue after the election, and it certainly won't be for me. I guess, to me, the moral and the honest thing to do is just, since it was an unintentional mistake, it certainly didn't have negative overtones on anyone, is just to let the people decide. Why make a huge deal out of it? And certainly I'm the underdog. I realize that as an underdog, major party candidates usually win races. So I have the most to lose here from a historical perspective. Is probably my candidacy was the long shot to begin with. And if I do the right thing here and say that it's not going to be contested on my part, I don't see what they have to fear, except the vote in November, which, since it's a democracy, it's the most honest and decent and simple way to solve the problem. Let the people decide.
Well, obviously you're running for a reason. What do you think positions you differently, and dare I say better, and more qualified than the other candidates that you're up against for this position?
Here I'll have to toot my horn a little bit. I think, and that's why I picked the slogan for my campaign. What I'll have to give credit to my daughter. We were huddling over that for 2 or 3 weeks, and finally she had a brainstorm and she said, "Dad, this is you." It was Laura. She said, "Revolutionary real."